My name is Sophia Reynolds, and I am 32 years old. I used to be a witch, someone who could see and communicate with spirits, perform rituals, and help clients connect with the unseen world. I once believed I was doing something important, acting as a bridge between two worlds. But then, I left it all behind. The story I'm about to share with you is not fiction, nor is it a ghost story created to scare or entertain. This is the true story of my life, a journey that took me from light to darkness, and ultimately back to the light in ways I never imagined. I don't expect you to believe everything I say right away. I only ask that you listen with an open mind. Because there are things in this world that cannot be explained by science or logic alone. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you were alone? Have you ever heard a strange whisper in the dead of night or caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of your eye, only for it to vanish when you turned? If you have ever experienced these things, then I have a question for you. Would you dare to step deeper into that world? I did. From a young age, I saw things that others couldn't. At first, I didn't understand what they were. But as I grew older, I realized I was different from other children. I could hear whispers at night, see shadowy figures move through the halls. I knew when a spirit was near, and over time, I learned how to communicate with them. At 17, I officially stepped into the world of witchcraft. I studied spells, ancient rituals, and learned how to use charms and summon unseen entities. I expanded my abilities, helping clients who came to me with questions about their future, lost loved ones, or even requests for spells to bring them luck, love, or wealth. I believed I was doing good, but I was wrong. When I was 31, an unexpected accident changed everything. In that blurred moment between life and death, I met him, a presence more radiant than anything I had ever seen. God did not scold me, nor did he judge me. He simply showed me the truth, a truth I had ignored for years. I had disturbed spirits, interfered with things that were never meant to be controlled by people like me. What I thought I was mastering was, in reality, mastering me. When I woke up, I knew I could no longer continue down the same path. I abandoned witchcraft, renounced the rituals, spells, and the career I had built for over a decade. I realized that spirits needed to rest in peace, not be summoned or bound by people like me, and that is why I'm telling my story. I am not here to convince you to believe in God, spirits, or the unseen world. I only want to share my journey so that you can draw your own conclusions. But I will leave you with one final question. If you could communicate with spirits, would you dare? And if you did, are you sure you'd be speaking to what you think you are? I don't quite know how to describe those first experiences. When I was little, I thought everyone was like me, that everyone could see strange things like that. But the older I got, the more I realized I was different. The first time I saw a spirit was when I was 5 years old. It was a hot summer night. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Then suddenly, a cold breeze brushed past me, even though the window was shut tight. When I opened my eyes, I saw a shadowy figure standing silently in the corner of my room. It wasn't anyone from my family. I remember that image clearly. A thin figure, long hair falling over their face, obscuring it completely. They didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, staring at me. I was frozen, unable to move. Clutching my blanket tightly, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would burst out of my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body felt paralyzed. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished, dissolving into thin air as if it had never been there. The next morning, I told my mother. She just patted my head and laughed, saying it must have been a bad dream. I didn't believe her, but I didn't argue either. After that, strange things started happening more often. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I would hear whispers echoing through my room, like someone was talking, but the words were always too faint to understand. Sometimes, I would catch a glimpse of a shadow slipping through the hallway, even though there was no one else in the house except my parents and me. The chill that ran down my spine whenever I walked past dark corners of the house became a familiar feeling, but I was just a child, and children are good at forgetting their fears. I continued growing up, going to school, making friends, and those strange occurrences gradually became a part of me. I no longer panicked when I heard whispers or saw fleeting shadows. Over time, these incidents became less frequent, then almost disappeared entirely. For a long period in my life, I no longer saw anything. From around the age of 11, I stopped hearing whispers, stopped feeling unseen presences. I thought maybe I had finally become normal. I focused on living a typical life, studying, making friends, dreaming about the future. But what I didn't realize was this: the spirit world had never left me. It was simply waiting for the right moment to return. And that moment came when I was 25 years old. That day, I was sitting in my small apartment, exhausted after a long day at work. I had just graduated from college, struggling with my first job and my endless stack of bills. As I curled up on the couch, sipping a cup of cold coffee, I suddenly heard a familiar sound, a whisper. At first, I thought I was imagining it. It had been over 10 years since I last heard something like this. But no, it was real, louder, closer. I felt a sudden chill envelop me. This sensation, I remembered it. I had experienced it countless times as a child, and for the first time in years, I realized they had never left. I had simply learned how to ignore them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, my mind racing with questions. What if everything I experienced as a child wasn't just my imagination? What if I actually had a special ability? I couldn't stop there. I started researching, delving into spirituality, into what people called the other side. At first, I just wanted to understand myself, but the more I explored, the deeper I was drawn in. I read ancient books on magic and spells. I learned how to use tarot cards, how to communicate with spirits. And then, I made a decision. I chose to walk the path of a witch. After spending time researching and practicing, I officially stepped into the path of witchcraft with serious intent. At first, I simply shared my spiritual experiences on social media, writing about energy, how to sense spirits, the things I learned from books, and my personal encounters. I never expected that within a short time, these posts would attract thousands of people. People started reaching out to me. At first, they asked simple questions like, how do I know if there's a spirit around me? Can I communicate with a deceased loved one? How do I protect myself from negative energy? I answered everything I knew. But soon, people didn't just want to hear theories. They wanted me to help them. They wanted readings, spirit connections, and spells to achieve their desires. And so, I stepped into the world of spiritual transactions. At first, I only did tarot readings for a few people. I wasn't focused on making money. I just wanted to practice and experiment with my abilities. But as my predictions started coming true, word spread, and more people sought me out. I remember the first time I performed a spirit summoning ritual. A woman came to me with tears in her eyes, begging me to help her communicate with her husband, who had died in an accident. She said she needed closure, that there were too many things left unsaid between them. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. That night, I prepared everything: candles, incense, a protective circle, and the incantations I had learned. As I began the ritual, the air in the room grew heavy, the temperature dropped, and I could feel an unseen presence surrounding me. And then, I heard it. A voice. Faint, but clear. It called the woman's name. She broke down in tears. And for the first time, I truly believed that I could do this. After that night, more and more clients came to me. I expanded my services to include tarot readings, spirit communication, and spellcasting for love, luck, and protection. Money started pouring into my account. From someone who used to struggle with bills at the end of the month, I now had a comfortable life, even enough to afford a bigger apartment. I was no longer just an ordinary person. I was a witch, someone who could see the unseen, touch things that others could not. But the deeper I delved into this path, the more I felt that something was wrong. Things were no longer as simple as before. I started noticing that every time I performed a ritual, I felt more drained than usual. At first, I thought it was just overwork, but no, it wasn't normal exhaustion. It felt like something was draining my energy, leaving me feeling empty and cold. Then one day, a client returned to me. She had once asked for a spell to bring her ex-boyfriend back. She told me that after using the charm, he did return. But instead of happiness, everything turned into a nightmare. He changed, becoming angry, violent, like something had taken over him. "What did you do to him? He's not the same person anymore," she sobbed, her eyes filled with fear. I didn't know how to answer her. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the dissatisfied clients. It was the spirits I summoned. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. But as time passed, I began to encounter angry, tormented spirits. They didn't want to be summoned. They didn't want to be disturbed. One night, while performing a ritual, I heard a voice, unlike any I had encountered before. This voice was cold, eerie. "You shouldn't be doing this." I froze. But I continued. "You are on the wrong path." This time I saw it. It wasn't a gentle soul, not a spirit seeking help. It was a dark entity, with empty eyes filled with rage and sorrow. It just stared at me, and I knew. I had made a terrible mistake. That night was just like any other. I was sitting in my workspace, my small table cluttered with tarot cards, energy stones, and scented candles. My phone kept vibrating with messages from clients booking readings and spell services. Business was booming, and I truly believed I was on the right path. However, throughout the day, I felt an unsettling sense of unease. It was as if someone was watching me, even when I was alone. The atmosphere in my house became heavy, almost suffocating. I thought I had grown accustomed to spiritual energy, but tonight, something was different. I stood up and left my room to go upstairs. As I stepped onto the staircase, a chill ran down my spine. I froze. I wasn't alone. I turned to look around, but there was no one there. The house was as quiet as ever. I tried to shake off the feeling and continued climbing. But just as I placed my foot on the next step, an invisible force seemed to pull me back. I slipped. My body tumbled down the stairs. I barely had time to process the sharp pain in my back before my head slammed into the floor. Everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I opened my eyes, I saw my own body. I was looking down at myself, lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. I blinked. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I lifted my hands, only to see a translucent version of myself I had left my body. Panic surged through me. I tried to touch my face, but my hands passed right through it. I turned my head, looking around. The house was the same, but something felt off. The air was different, as if I was caught between two worlds. And then, the light appeared. It wasn't from any lamp or the sun. It was brighter than anything I had ever seen, yet it didn't hurt my eyes. A sense of peace, unlike anything I had ever known, washed over me, as though I was returning to a place I had always known but forgotten. I felt pulled into the light. There was no fear, only an overwhelming sense of surrender. Then, I stood before a presence. It had no defined form, but I knew it was there. It did not speak with words, yet I understood everything it conveyed. There was a presence, majestic, yet loving, that enveloped me completely. "Do you know why you are here?" The voice echoed in my mind, not judgmental, not angry, just truth. I didn't know how to answer. "You have stepped into the spiritual world, but you do not truly understand what you are doing." The words hit me like a hammer against my soul. I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, visions flooded my mind. I saw every ritual I had ever performed. But this time, I was not seeing them as a practitioner. I was seeing them through the eyes of the spirits. I saw spirits terrified and tormented as they were summoned against their will. I saw entities I once believed were my spiritual guides, but now I could see their true nature. Some of them were not benevolent at all. Some were deceivers, using me as a vessel to enter this world. I shuddered. I had never seen this before. "Do you understand what you have done?" I had no answer. I could not answer. God did not speak again. Instead, I was suddenly transported elsewhere. Heaven. There were no clouds, no angels like in paintings. Instead, it was a feeling, a peace beyond anything I could describe. I saw radiant souls glowing with love and serenity. I realized that these spirits did not need to be summoned. They were at peace, and they wanted to stay at peace. Then, the scene shifted. I fell. And suddenly, I was in hell. There was no fire, no demons. But the suffering here was more terrifying than anything I had ever witnessed. Souls wandered in darkness, lost, tormented. They cried out, but no one could hear them. I recognized some of them. A woman turned to look at me. It was a former client, someone who had asked me to perform a ritual to contact her deceased husband. But now, instead of happiness, her eyes were filled with agony. "Why did you help me do that?" I had no answer. I was brought back to the light. God was still there, waiting patiently for me to understand. You can continue on your path, but you can also change. I do not force you to follow me, but I want you to know the truth. Are you ready to awaken? And at that moment I understood everything. The truth about what I had done, about the spiritual world I thought I knew, about the mistakes I had unknowingly made. I knew I could never go back to the way I was. I had to change. I stood there, overwhelmed, as the divine presence surrounded me with an unfathomable love. But beneath that love, there was something else, a solemn truth that I could not escape. God's voice resonated within me once more, not in anger, but in an undeniable certainty. Because of what you have done, you are now being threatened by the dark forces. A chill ran through me. I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me, the same suffocating heaviness that had followed me for years. I had always brushed it off as exhaustion, as the natural toll of working with spiritual forces. But now, I understood the truth. These weren't just spirits I had casually interacted with. These were the souls I had disturbed, the ones I had summoned, against their will, the ones I had used for my own gain. And now, they were coming for me. Images flashed before my eyes. I saw every spell I had cast, every seance I had conducted, every time I had called upon an entity without knowing its true nature. I had spent years opening doors, reaching into the unknown, forcing spirits to respond to my rituals. But I had never asked myself, what happens to them after? Now I saw it. Some spirits had been restless souls, lingering between worlds, forced to answer my call. Some had been suffering entities, confused, angry, desperate for peace, but unable to find it because I had chained them to the earthly realm. Some weren't even human. I saw dark figures lurking in the corners of my rituals, waiting, feeding off the energy. I had been playing with forces I could never hope to control, and now they wanted something in return. I shuddered as a realization struck me. The nightmares, the whispers in the night, the eerie shadows that always seemed to be in my peripheral vision. It had never been my imagination. They had always been there, watching, waiting, feeding off the energy I had poured into my craft, waiting for the moment I would be weak enough for them to take what they believed was theirs. I had made a deal without realizing it, and now I was paying the price. Tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to beg for mercy, to undo everything, to erase my mistakes, but God did not offer me a way out. Instead, He told me the hardest truth of all. The only thing you can do now is endure the consequences and pray for them. Pray for them? The ones who wanted to hurt me? The ones who had spent years lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting? Yes. I did not understand. But God's voice was firm, unwavering. You disturbed their rest. You used their pain. And now they are lost, suffering because of it. You must pray for them, so that they may find peace. I felt a lump rise in my throat. All this time, I had thought I was helping people, that I was providing them with closure, with answers. I had convinced myself that I was doing something good. But now, I saw the truth. I had taken lost souls and dragged them into even greater suffering. And in doing so, I had bound myself to their pain. There was no spell that could undo this. No ritual that could cleanse me. No shortcut to freedom. Only prayer, only endurance. Terror gripped my soul. How could I possibly endure this? How could I face the darkness I had unleashed? But then, in that vast, infinite presence of light, I felt something else. A hand upon my shoulder. Warmth. Peace. And then, God spoke again. But I will protect you. A flood of emotions washed over me. Relief, gratitude, hope. I was not alone. Even though I had made mistakes, even though I had walked the wrong path, God had not abandoned me. He had allowed me to see the truth, not to punish me, but to guide me. Back. Are you ready to return? I hesitated. I knew what awaited me back in the physical world. The spirits would still be there. The consequences would not disappear. But now, I had something I never had before. Faith. I took a deep breath. Yes. And then, I woke up. A sharp pain spread from my head down to every muscle in my body, drowning me in dizziness so intense that I almost lost consciousness again. I lay there, motionless on the cold floor, feeling warm blood still trickling down my face. Tried to steady my breathing, listening to the rapid thumping of my heartbeat. In that moment, I knew I was still alive. I still had a chance to change. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, which had fallen nearby. The screen was cracked, but when I pressed the button, it lit up. My fingers shook as I dialed emergency services. I fell. My head is bleeding badly. My address is... I gasped for air, my vision blurring from blood loss, but I forced myself to stay conscious. When the dispatcher reassured me that an ambulance was on its way, I closed my eyes. I knew my life would never be the same again. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned home with a heavily bandaged head and a heart weighed down with thoughts. I had survived, but I understood that a part of my old self had died the moment I touched the divine realm. I couldn't continue this work anymore. With that thought, I opened my laptop and began drafting emails to all my clients who had booked tarot readings, spell castings, and seances in the coming weeks. I'm sorry. I can no longer continue this work. I hope you understand. I didn't give any reason, no explanations. I simply couldn't. Some clients responded quickly. Some were surprised, others curious, and a few even worried. But most of them respected my decision. Some even admitted they had always felt uneasy about engaging in such rituals, but continued out of curiosity. When I sent my final message, I felt as though I had just set down a heavy burden I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for so many years. But my task wasn't over yet. I opened my social media platforms, the accounts I had spent years building. Posts about spells, tarot readings, and spirit summoning had gained me thousands of followers. I had once taken pride in that. Now, looking at it, I felt nothing but emptiness. I began typing my final message. A last message to my followers. To everyone who has followed me over the years. I know many of you came to me seeking answers, comfort, and connections to things beyond this world. I understand, because I once longed for those things too. But today, I want to tell you that I have left this path. I no longer believe in what I was doing. And I hope that you too will reconsider the spiritual path you are following. There are things that do not belong to us. There are doors that, once opened, We cannot control what comes through. I have seen, I have understood, and I have chosen to walk away. I pray that all of you will find the true light. May blessings be upon you all. I pressed post. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some were shocked, some disappointed, some understanding. A few were angry, accusing me of betrayal, but I didn't care. Without hesitation, I deleted all my social media accounts. Strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was peace. I had just walked away from the work I had excelled at, from the lucrative income that had supported me for years. But I felt no sense of loss. On the contrary, for the first time in years, I felt light, as if I had freed myself from an invisible prison I hadn't even realized I was trapped in. I looked up at the blue sky through my window. I knew that this was only the beginning.